And welcome back to another video. Before we get into today's video, I just want to do the usual. So if you're new here, my name's Amber and I upload beauty, fashion and lifestyle videos. If that is the type of content that you like, then please hit that subscribe button and come along and join my little family. And if you're already part of the family, make sure that notification bell switched on just so you're notified of whenever I upload a video. But today's video is going to be another True Crime Tuesday video, and if you don't know, True Crime Tuesday is a newish series that I've started on my channel, and what I do is I do my makeup while talking about a true crime case. True crime's always interested me and I love makeup, so I combined the two together to create this series. I'm not the first person on YouTube to do this, and I do say this in every video. I have took inspiration from other YouTubers such as Bailey Sarian. I absolutely love her videos, and if you've not checked her out, you need to go and check her out. She's like a queen of murder and makeup videos. You definitely need to go and check her out, she is absolutely insane. Anyway guys, I just want to do a quick disclaimer before we get into this video. I'm just going to flash it up on screen now. So warning, this does contain adult themes and adult references, and if that is something that is going to bother you, then you might want to click off this video. I also just want to quickly mention that I do not mean any disrespect to anyone that I speak about in this video. This is purely just for educational purposes. Today we're going to be talking about a lady called Leonarda Cianciulli. I've probably absolutely butchered that name, but basically she was an Italian female serial killer who murdered 3 women. So Leonardo is also actually known as the soap maker of Correggio. That is because when she murdered these 3 women, what she did was she actually turned them into tea cakes and soap to give to her friends, family and neighbours. Who thinks of these things? Like what made her think to do that? I have no idea, but anyway. So just to give you a bit of backstory about Leonardo, she was born on the 18th of April in 1894 in Montella, Italy. She was born as a result of rape. Her mother, Amelia di Noffi, sorry if I can't pronounce these names properly, I'm not great with pronunciation, she was forced to marry her rapist, which was obviously Leonardo's dad, who was called Mariano Cianciulli. I think maybe because of what had happened to Amelia, she really resented Leonardo and she didn't show her any love and affection, and she just didn't have a lot of time for her at all. So that led to Leonardo then had a very turbulent upbringing. It led to Amelia really emotionally neglecting Leonardo. She was very abusive towards Leonardo, and this was obviously because Leonardo reminded her of everything she wanted to forget, which is completely understandable in a way. It's awful, but it's completely understandable because she didn't have a choice. She was forced into this situation where she had to marry her rapist, and I think that is quite a sad story. Leonardo was raised in one of the most poverty-stricken areas of Italy during the late 19th century and early 20th century. Her dad did die quite early on in her life, and her mother later went on to remarry. I think her mother remarried because the family was really financially struggling, but her remarrying the man that she married to really didn't help the family financially at all. So over the years in her childhood, a combination of like losing her dad and the mental abuse from her mother, it really took a toll on Leonardo, and she actually tried to commit suicide twice early on in her life. So while she was still a child, she tried to commit suicide, which is just absolutely awful. But obviously she didn't have any sort of support there. I'm not justifying her actions later on in her life, but I'm just saying, like, as a child she just didn't have that support system there. So, you know, when she was probably going through the loss of her dad, she probably felt like she couldn't mourn because of how her mother was towards the father, because her father did rape the mother, if that makes sense. So she was an extremely superstitious woman. She believed in fortune telling, astrology and palm reading, and in her younger years she did visit a fortune teller. So she met a fortune teller, and this fortune teller said, "You will have many children, but all of your children will die young." This followed her through into her adult life because she was super protective when she did have children. On a separate occasion she met a Romany palm reader, and the palm reader actually said to her, in Leonardo's right hand she saw prison and in her left hand she saw a criminal asylum. And it's quite spooky because she wasn't wrong about either. As time went on, she actually ended up in both a mental asylum and a prison, which is just bizarre. So when Leonardo was just 20 years old in 1914, she actually went against her parents' wishes and she'd met a guy that she sort of fell for. They had already picked her out a wealthy suitor, the parents, and obviously because they were financially struggling, they really wanted Leonardo to marry this wealthy suitor that they'd picked out. But she went on to marry an office clerk called Raphael Pansardi, who was much older than her, but he wasn't wealthy. So as you can imagine, her mother was not too impressed, to say the least. Because she'd gone against her mother's wishes, Leonardo always claimed that from that day forward her mother had put a curse on her and her husband for disobeying what they had already like laid out for her, because obviously they did want her to marry this like wealthy suitor. So like to the likes of me and you, that might sound absolutely ridiculous, but obviously just someone who is like super superstitious like Leonardo, who'd already had these sort of premonitions, if you like, from the palm reader and the fortune teller that she'd spoken to her it was real life and it was serious, and she took these things very seriously. And to be quite honest, from this point onwards her life was pretty much filled with misery, pain and misfortune. So was she cursed? Who knows? So a few years later, Leonardo and her husband decide to move to his hometown of Loria in 1921. The couples had financial problems pretty much from the beginning of their relationship. They did struggle financially. The problem was Raphael, once they started to have children, Raphael didn't earn enough to support the family financially, and even though Leonardo did earn money, even the pair's earnings put together just wasn't enough to support their family. That can cause a lot of stress in a family structure. So over the years, Leonardo had 17 pregnancies. She lost the majority of them. So out of the 17 pregnancies, 3 of them ended in miscarriage. 10 of them died in early childhood. So some of these, like 10 of these children she actually brought up and raised, and for them to die in early childhood, that must be horrific. You know, like miscarriages are so horrific, but to actually raise a child and then have 10 children die on you is just horrendous. So only 4 out of her 17 children actually survived, and she then became a little bit like a mother lion and was very, very overprotective of her children. She wanted them close to home. She didn't want anything to happen to them, and she just wanted the best for her children. So then in 1927, several years after the couple have moved to Raphael's hometown, Leonardo gets arrested and ends up in prison for fraud. Not a lot is known about what fraud it was, because you know this is a very old case, and you do find with older cases it is more difficult to get in-depth knowledge. All I know is that she was arrested and imprisoned for fraud. I don't know what type of fraud it was. She was clearly trying to do something to earn more money for the family, I would imagine. So shortly after this she was released from prison. So it can't have been anything particularly major, because I don't think she served an awful long prison sentence. In 1930, a couple of years after she'd been arrested for fraud, the family's home in Lacedonia was actually destroyed. Can this woman's luck get any worse? There was an earthquake in the town and it actually destroyed the majority of the town, and little remained of their home and little remained of the town. So it meant that the family had to up and move once again to a town called Correggio. And as you can tell, soap maker of Correggio, this is where things take a twist for the dark, and yeah. So they wanted to become more financially stable. They've got children, they want to support their family, and she just wants the best for them. So this seemed like the smart choice. So when they get to the town, in a bid to become financially stable, which was the aim, they decide to open a little shop, and they open like a little soap shop. So this little soap shop was very, very popular within the town, and Leonardo was a very, very liked and respected member of the community. She was very popular. She was described as a nice, gentle woman, a doting mother and a nice neighbour. It's also said she did use the shop to sell her services as a fortune teller, and she had a favourable reputation as one, so people did really trust in what she said. She garnered a regular list of clients in doing so. This move wasn't particularly favourable on her relationship with Raphael. The stress and I think like the amount of things they'd been through throughout the years, the cracks in the relationship did start to show, and there was issues in their relationship. It started to really grind Leonardo's gears, I think, and she just wasn't happy. So in this new town, for all Leonardo was very popular and had this little popular soap shop, Raphael really struggled to find work, and that really started to affect him mentally, and he then turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism to drown his sorrows, and Leonardo wasn't putting up with that. She wasn't happy with him being sat at home drinking himself to death, so she actually kicked him out, never to be heard from again, or so is said. Who knows? It's interesting because some people do theorise that was Raphael her first victim. He sort of goes off the map after they split up, so it's just interesting to me. You know, could it be argued that this was her first victim? In 1939, the Second World War had actually broke out, and Italy was looking to enter the war on the side of Germany. This is when they start looking for recruit. Leonardo had learned that her eldest son and favourite child, Giuseppe, had been designated to be part of the Italian army, and being the mother lion that she is, she wanted to try and do anything she possibly could to protect him, because obviously she didn't want anything to happen to him. You know, she'd already had this major loss of all those children. She didn't want to lose a favourite son. So Leonardo became very scared for her son's safety and was literally prepared to do anything to protect him at all costs. She then came up with this warped mentality that the only way she could save her son was through human sacrifice. By sacrificing someone else, they would then take her son's place in the afterlife, so they wouldn't come for her son. So in them taking his place in the afterlife, that meant that he wouldn't have to die. I don't know what book she was reading and where she got this from, but obviously that's what she believed. So Leonardo decided to prey on 3 of her friends and clients. So Leonardo's first victim was a lady called Faustina Setti, and she was a middle-aged unmarried woman. She was looking for love, bless her. She just wanted a husband, that's all she wanted. She was a lifelong spinster looking for love. So what Leonardo did was she tricked Faustina by basically telling her that she'd found her this perfect, suitable husband. He lived in Pola. She wasn't allowed to tell anyone. She wasn't allowed to tell her friends and family until she'd left. Leonardo didn't want people sniffing around. She didn't want people to know. So Leonardo actually convinced Faustina to also write like postcards and letters to her family to send once she'd left for Pola. So obviously Leonardo planned to send these herself. No one was going to come looking for her. No one was going to be worried if they were receiving these postcards to say all was well. Faustina never ever reached Pola. This just wasn't a thing. It wasn't going to happen. So on the day that she was supposed to depart to meet her lovely new husband, who doesn't even exist, poor woman, on this day she decided to stop by Leonardo's shop just to give her like one last thank you for everything that she'd done. Leonardo decided what she was going to do was give her some drugged wine. So she actually drugged Faustina's wine. Then obviously Faustina fell unconscious because her wine had been drugged, and Leonardo murdered her with an axe. And this woman thought she was going to find the love of her life. It's so awful. She pulled her dead body into a closet, and then she hacked her into 9 pieces. So Leonardo, after she was arrested, then went on to speak to the police, and she actually, very detailed, told the police what she had done to poor Faustina Setti. She actually did say in her official statement, "I threw the piece into a pot, added 7 kilos of caustic soda, which I had bought to make soap, and stirred the mixture together until it dissolved into a thick dark mush that I poured into several buckets and emptied into a nearby septic tank. As for the blood in the basin, I waited until it had congealed, dried it in the oven, ground it and mixed it with flour, sugar, milk and eggs, as well as a bit of margarine. I kneaded all the ingredients together. I made lots of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies who came to visit, though Giuseppe and I also ate them." She then decided, oh my god, I've just had an absolutely insane idea. Why don't I make it into soap and cakes? She knowingly ate this woman's blood, as well as giving it to unknown victims. That's awful. According to some sources, this isn't very clear, but Leonardo got Faustina Setti's life savings as payment for her services. You've got to look at this from more than just the point of view of, not only was she gaining because she thought she was saving her son, but she was financially gaining in more way than one, because she was financially gaining the fact she was making these tea cakes and soap to sell in her shop, as well as the fact that, like in this occasion, she possibly got this lady's life savings. So all she ever wanted was to be financially stable. So as time went on and she committed these 2 other murders, it begs the question of, did she murder these girls because she was trying to save her son, or did she start to enjoy the financial gain? So her second victim was called Francesca Soavi, and just like Faustina, she was also a middle-aged woman who was just after a bit of help, a little bit of advice. So Leonardo actually convinced Francesca that she'd found her this perfect job as a school for girls in Piacenza, sorry if I can't pronounce that. It's basically modern day northern Italy. So she was asked to correspond with friends exactly like she'd done with Faustina. She wanted her to, you know, create letters and all of this because she wanted to obviously save her own skin. She arrives on her day of departure to thank her friend Leonardo for everything she's done for her, and upon her arrival she then gets a drugged glass of wine. And again, she was murdered with an axe exactly the same as Faustina. So Francesca receives exactly the same treatment as the previous victim, Faustina, and she meets her untimely death. It is said that she received 3,000 lira from the death of her second victim, so there's definitely financial gain here alongside the gain of sort of saving her son. So Leonardo's final victim was a lady called Virginia Cacioppo. I might have pronounced that wrong, I apologise. She was a former soprano star, so in her day she had reportedly performed at La Scala, which was a famous opera house in Milan. You know, she'd been pretty successful throughout her life. So when she went to see Leonardo, she again informed her that she had this fantastical job for her and this perfect job in Florence as a secretary. And the same with the other 2 ladies, she instructed her not to tell anyone until she'd arrived at the destination, and then she could let people know. So again, this lady stops by to say goodbye to her good friend Leonardo after everything she'd done for her, and she receives the same fate as the other 2 ladies and meets her untimely death. Leonardo had a really interesting statement on the death of Virginia, and she actually went on to say she ended up in a pot like the other 2. Her flesh was fat and white. When it had melted, I added a bottle of cologne, and after a long time on the boil I was able to make the most acceptable creamy soap. I gave baths to neighbours and acquaintances. The cakes too were better. That woman was really sweet. Leonardo also received jewels from Virginia along with a further 50,000 lira. So she was raking it in from these crimes. But you know, for people, all good things come to an end, and she did get caught. The issue was, like happens in a lot of cases, she got greedy, and the last killing of Virginia was her downfall, because what she didn't suspect was that people would come looking for these women. Virginia had a sister-in-law, and the sister-in-law became very suspicious of her, like Virginia's sudden disappearance. She knew this was like out of the blue and it wasn't the norm for her. The sister-in-law reported this to the authorities, and the authorities raided Leonardo's home because she told the authorities that the last place she'd ever seen her was entering Leonardo's residence. Then Leonardo was subsequently arrested. So in the beginning she actually fully denied killing anyone. She was adamant that it hadn't happened. But then Giuseppe, the son, was implicated in the murders, and obviously she wasn't going to let her son go down for something like this, so she stepped forward and confessed. In 1946 her trial was conducted and she was found guilty of committing all crimes. I'm just going to pop off camera and do my lips, and then we'll get back and finish off the case. So after being found guilty to committing the murders, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and she was also sentenced to 3 years in a criminal asylum. Now if you remember what I was saying earlier about what the palm reader said, she wasn't wrong, because she actually ended up both in prison and in a criminal asylum, which is just craziness. And the other fortune teller was right about her children as well, which is just bizarre. On October 15th 1970, Leonardo actually passed away in a women's asylum in Pozzuoli after suffering from cerebral epilepsy for a prolonged period. She was 76-year-old, and many of the artifacts from this case are actually in a museum in Rome, which is like a criminological museum, like including the pot that she used to boil her victims. They've got all of these in this museum in Rome. Anyway guys, I'm just going to do a final summary on this case. I think this is such a twisted one, because I think she's had, like, you do sympathise with her in a way because of her upbringing, but the way she went about things, I just don't understand why she did. Well, maybe it's because she is so superstitious that that's why she did what she did, but I do feel like, I'm not sure what you guys think, but I do feel like after the first killing, there's one person to take your son's place in the afterlife, so surely you don't need to murder anyone else. So I do believe that she got addicted to the financial gain and the money that she was making from selling the soaps and the cakes. It was making her shop more popular. So I do believe there was a little bit of financial gain there with her business prospects, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. I just think this one is so crazy, how someone goes from murdering someone because of a superstition to turning them into tea cakes and soap. It's absolutely crazy, but it's so scary though that these people unwillingly ate these tea cakes and probably bathed with the soap. Like, that is just absolutely crazy, isn't it? Anyway guys, I'd love to know your thoughts and feelings on this case. Let me know down below, and I shall see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.